welcome back to this online lecture series on structural failures and repair. In the previous lecture, we have been discussing regarding the first stage of evaluation of structure, that is the preliminary investigation, right? And in today's lecture, we are going to discuss regarding the detailed investigation under the category of evaluation of the structure. Now, as the name is suggesting, detailed investigation. So basically, detailed investigation is suggesting that you need to look into the small and minute details that are necessary to achieve the objective that is set for this evaluation of the structure. Whether the structure needs to be retrofitted, whether it needs to be strengthened, or whether the preservation of the structure has to be done. Right. So, in order to achieve this objective that is set by the client at the beginning of the evaluation, the second stage of evaluation is the detailed investigation. So, the what you can say, the need for further investigation is first of all established under the category of preliminary investigation. That is, we have seen that in the last case, that when you present the report, the fifth point that you are going to mention in the report is regarding the further investigation, wherein you give the suggestion to the client that whether further investigation is required or not, right? So that is why the objective or the need for the detailed investigation will be what you can say set when the primary investigation, preliminary investigation is going to be over, right? So it is important that the project budget and the cost of detailed investigation be approved by the owner before processing with the investigation, right? So again, for any exercise that we are going to take out or carry out during this process of evaluation of the structure needs the approval of the owner, right? So that is why it is mentioned over here that the project budget should be approved beforehand, before proceeding with the stage of the detailed investigation. Now, if we look about the stages of detailed investigation, because as we have seen earlier also that in case of the preliminary investigation also, we had 5 stages through which the sequence was followed and the results were obtained. Similarly, here in case of detailed investigation also, we have 5 steps which need to be followed in order to perform the investigation in an engineered way or an organized. First is regarding the documentation. That is, after the preliminary investigation is done and when you are going to take up the task of detailed investigation, then in that case you need to plan and prepare for the documentation. That is, you need to collect all the necessary information that is required for carrying out the detailed information, and whatever information you are getting should be properly filed, and then when you are going to submit the report, along with that report, all these documents that you have collected need to be presented or handed over to the client. Then second is site observation or the field observation and condition survey. Third is sampling and testing of the material. Fourth one is the evaluation, and fifth one is the final report, right? So now, just like in case of previous lecture we have seen, similarly here also we are going to take up these topics one by one and see which of the things need to be included under each of these categories. So if we talk about the first category, that is documentation, then in case of documentation, we need to focus on 4 or 5 different things. Which are those things? Where first thing is that you need to collect the design information. Second is material information. Third is construction information. Fourth is service history, and fifth is the communication. So basically, as I said, that this particular portion of documentation is about collecting as many data, physical data as much possible. This physical data can be in the form of drawing, it can be in the form of conversations, it can be in the form of reports, it can be in the form of journals, and it can be in the form of test reports, right? So when you talk about design information, then in case of design information, basically it is talking us to collect as many information in terms of drawing, that is design drawings, detailed drawings, fabrication drawings, right? Then if form of drawings are there, concrete placing drawings are there, if any particular shape is to be achieved, then what is the engineering drawing that is prepared for that particular shape? All these kind of documents that are to be collected under the category of design information. Which was the code followed, which were the loads considered, any exceptions were discussed on, any changes were discussed on site, and whether this document or the information that is provided here in the form of data is matching with the thing that is there on site or not. That comes under the category of design. Second is material information. So again, when you talk about material information, you are talking about the grade of concrete, the size of the aggregate, the testing of cement, testing of steel, testing of other materials, and their test report, right? Along with that, the pour card, then the curing period, then if any modification is done in the construction sequence, or if any particular construction sequence is discussed or not, and if it is there on record, then you need to check whether the same thing is done on site or not, right? So all the things regarding the material information need to be carried out. Then third is the construction information. When you talk about construction information, again, in case of construction information, you talk about the sequence in which the construction is done. If any special construction techniques or special construction equipments have been used, what is the load transfer mechanism that is assumed, then how the load transfer is taking place, whether the on-site situation is matching with the things given on the site or not, what is the communication between the owner, client, and the contractor, right? Then the results of the test report, results of cube casting that is done on the site for each of the batches, whether it was mentioned or not, and whether it is being reported in the form of document or not, right? Then any verbal communication or any other communication or any reports that are presented by means of the contractor or any third party investigation agencies, and whether the access to these reports are available or not. Then you talk about service history, then whether the maintenance of the structure has been carried out over a period of years or not. If yes, then what is the maintenance that was done? What is the details regarding this maintenance, whether it was a structural maintenance or a non-structural maintenance? What was the cost and what was the modification that was done? Modification history. All this data will come under the category of service history, right? If any expansion was planned, whether the expansion was carried out or not, right? If the number of stories were likely to increase, whether anything of that sort has been done or not. If any leakage issue was there, how was it resolved? What was the action taken? And what was the discussion that took place during that particular time? And lastly, you talk about the communication. That is the communication with the owner, with the neighbors, with the contractors, with the original designers, with the local authorities, in the form of letters, in the form of documents, in the form of emails. If these things are accessible, then this information should also be collected. Then the next stage that comes under the detailed investigation is the part of field observation and condition. So that is, once we are having this all the documentation and we have studied this documentation, then you decide to again go for the site visit. And when you visit the site this time, then you go with a certain kind of planning and preparation. That is, because now we are going to observe the thing in a very detailed manner. So in that case, you need to prepare certain documents in your office also before going to visit site. For example, you need to prepare or you need to plan in such a way that the structural aspects of the observer site visit will be mentioned will be listed down in this particular document in this fashion. If any alterations are there, then it will be mentioned in this sheet. If the dimensions need to be cross-checked, then these and these dimensions will be checked. Height of the floor, span of the member. Then if deflections are there, then what is the actual deflection observed on site? Everything will be noted. If cracks are there, what is the width of the crack? What is the depth of the crack? What is the location of the crack? You take some photographs. You make a video wherever necessary. Right? If any uneven loading is observed on the site, then you take a note of that things. Right? What are the cause of this loading? What are the cause of changes or maintenance that was done over a period of years? These are all different things that you observe on site and you record them down into different categories. And then after collecting all the data, you analyze the data and you decide whether this particular thing is going to having a serious threat of the life of the structure or the performance of the structure or not, right? So that is, first you need to do the preparation and planning in the office level. Then when you go to the site, you do the verification with the documentation data that you are having. Then condition assessment of the structure that you do, right? Then location and frequency of the problem, and lastly the summary report based on the observations that you are making on the site. Then you talk about the evaluation. That is, once all this data is available with you, then you come back to the office, then you analyze, and then you evaluate. So when you do this evaluation process, then evaluation process is going to be having the following categories that are over. Where first is you cross-check the dimension and geometry. Second, you do the material evaluation. That is, whatever the material test or the material data that is available with you is the same data being the same type of material being observed on the site or not. If any modification is there, if the retrofitting material is going to be there, then what is the feasibility of using that material with the existing material? What are the properties of repair material that will be required? All these things need to be studied under the category of material and geometry. Right? Then structural evaluation. In case of structural evaluation, that is basically you will need to check whether the structure is capable of undergoing this change or not. So this change can be, or this evaluation can be done in three forms. First is you do only an analysis model. That is, for example, you carry out the analysis using FEM or some other kind of model. Right? Second is you also prepare a physical model of that particular. And thirdly is that you check with respect to the confinement of the current code. Now, after doing all these three evaluation, you will be able to decide whether this structure is capable of undergoing these necessary changes or not, right? So that is why the structural evaluation part is there. Then you also check the evaluation of alternatives, that is the rehabilitation process that you are proposing, whether there is an alternative which is going to be more economical in nature, more faster in nature, more feasible in nature. Then you look for that alternative also, because you cannot always go with one answer. You also need to have a backup option, right? And last is the cost evaluation. That is, for example, you are proposing a certain thing, a certain type of rehabilitation or re-strengthening process. Then what is the cost associated? What is the time that is going to be there? What are going to be the pros and cons of that particular thing? Is the operation cost is also going to be affected or not? These all different things have to be evaluated along with the engineering services that you are going to provide. This needs to be considered in the category of cost evaluation. And lastly, based on that, you prepare a final report. And in case of final report, you need to provide the following heads, where first is you mention the purpose and scope of the investigation. Second, you give a brief about the existing details that you have collected. Third, you talk about the documentation, that is the physical documentation that you have with you. Then you talk about field observation and condition survey. Then sampling and testing that is carried out on the site, that is NDT test and the exploratory removal. Along with that, the evaluation results that are going to be there, and based on that, you propose your recommendation and conclusion whether the proposed objective can be achieved or not. If yes, then show what is the cost associated, what is the time associated, and what is the sequence in which the construction is. Right? Because as I said at the very beginning, that in case of evaluation, proper engineering judgment and proper following of the sequence is very important, because until and unless that is achieved, then as a result of that, the objective of evaluation of structure cannot be achieved, right? So I hope that you have got a proper insight into how the evaluation of structure needs to be carried out whenever the situation is therein. And when you talk about finding and recommendation, lastly, then the finding and recommendation should also include 4 objectives. Which are those 4? First is the action plan, that is how this particular proposal that you are putting forward is to be executed on site. That comes under the category of action plan. What are the backup to that particular option? If that option fails, then what is the other backup that you are in, right? Then you talk about the cost estimation associated with the options that you are presenting. Then the scheduling, that is which is the sequence in which this entire activity is going to be carried out. And lastly, the constraints and feasibility determination. That is when you are going to do this particular activity, are there any site constraints? Are there any cost constraints? Are there any labor constraints? Or are there any material constraints? That needs to be sorted out, and that needs to be discussed and clearly conveyed to the client in the report itself, right? So there is no scope for any hidden aspect in that. The better means the worst, what is going to happen is that the better or more clarity that you provide to the client, the result of the investigation is going to be better, right? So it is necessary that you go into the investigation with a very clear approach, and whatever is being observed, without any kind of favor to the engineer or to the contractor or the owner, you make the correct decision, which is going to be your engineering decision, through which the performance of the structure can be. I hope you have enjoyed today's lecture. Stay tuned.